let's have a quick recap of the topic process of performance management that we have discussed in yesterday's class before, because today's topic performance appraisal is actually one of the step. If you remember, it is actually one of the step in the process of performance management. Right now, see, basically, what is the process that we have discussed for performance management? We have discussed the process of performance management. Like in the first step, the organizational goals are broken down and the relevant goals are taken. In the second step of the process of the performance management, what did we discuss? We discussed that performance standards or the goals are basically communicated to the employees, right? They are set and they are communicated to the employees, and then ongoing performance happens, and regular feedback is given or monitoring part happens in this step. And next, what happens? Performance appraisal. Today's topic, performance appraisal happens, and after that, based on the outcomes of the performance appraisal, certain HR decisions are taken. We have discussed this as a process of performance management, right, in the previous class. Now, see, if you are still confused, if you are still confused with the entire process of performance management, let me give you a small example so that we can relate the entire process of performance management with this example. Now, let us consider that there is a particular organization and its main objective is to be the number one competitor or the number one pioneer or the number one company in the market. Okay. So this is an example where there is this particular organization, any organization, just for example, there is this particular organization whose main objective is to become the number one pioneer or the number one company in the market. Now, in order for an organization or a company to be number one in the market, there are so many different things that it has to basically achieve, right? In order to see, now here only objective visible is becoming number one in the market, but there are so many other things that the organization has to concentrate on in order to achieve that one objective. That means that one goal of becoming number one in the organization has so many different sub goals. Like if you want to be number one in the in the competition market or in the market, basically you have to be number one in production, you have to be number one in performance, you have to be number one in the quantity produced, you have to be number one in the quality, you have to be number one in the customer base, in sales, and each and everything you have to be number one. Then only you will actually be able to dominate the entire competitor market, right? Now, see, we told that in the first step of performance management, the organizational goals are broken down and the relevant goals are picked up. That means just now I told you that, see, if an organization wants to become number one in the, or basically if the objective of an organization is to become the number one organization or the number one company in the entire market, it has to achieve so many different sub goals, right? Now, among so many different sub goals, all the goals that are relevant or all the goals that are related to the performance aspect, we bring them into this particular concept of performance management. Okay. Now there may be so many other different sub goals, like trying to increase the customer base, or trying to implement new marketing strategies, or trying to increase the production capacity of the machinery installed in the organization. Now there are also so many different sub goals, but here what we do is, out of all the sub goals or out of the main goal, what we do is we take out all the goals that are relevant or related to the performance thing, and we bring them here. Now once we have separated all the performance related objectives or performance related goals, what we do is we further break them down and we assign them in this particular broken parts in the form of performance standards to the employees. That is the second step in the process of performance management. And next, what happens? See, you had your main objectives and you have taken relevant things from the main objectives in the first step. Now you have broken down them into different pieces, and you have assigned each and every employee certain performance standards. Now what they do in the third step, they actually start performing it, right? Now while they are performing, we also said that continuous feedback or continuous monitoring happens. That means whether each and everything is going according to the schedule or not. So each and everything, basically the monitoring part happens, and instant feedback is provided in this particular step. Now next, what happens after a certain period of time, performance appraisal takes place. Now what is this performance appraisal and all? Today we'll be discussing in today's class. Just remember that in the next step, performance appraisal happens, and after that, based on the outcomes of the performance appraisal, HR decisions are taken. We have discussed about this in the previous class, right? So this is basically the example related to the the process of performance management. That means we took the example of an organization which wants to be number one. So what we did, we broke down its objectives, and we took all the objectives or goals in terms of performance, and we have broken down them further in further aspects, and we have divided each and every sub goal or each and every broken part of the goal to certain employees, based on their capacities or based on their positions. We have basically divided all the goals related to the performance to different employees, telling that okay, these are your performance standards and this particular performance or this level of performance is expected from you in this way. So they'll start performing, meanwhile we will be giving feedback, and after a certain period of time, performance appraisal takes place where we basically evaluate, and then we measure the actual given performance standards and their actual performance that is delivered by them. And based on the measurement and based on the difference, or which may be positive difference or which may be negative difference, based on the difference, we communicate them certain, we communicate with them telling that okay, this is your performance. In this way, communication happens related to performance, between the employer or the person who gives performance appraisal and the employee who has given his performance. And based on that, certain HR decisions take place, like whether this employee deserves a raise, or whether this employee deserves a promotion, or whether this employee requires training, counseling, coaching, mentoring, or each and everything. So this is basically is the entire thing that we have discussed in the previous class. So I just use this example in order to represent the entire process of performance management. Right now, let's get into today's main topic, which is performance appraisal. So what do we mean by performance appraisal? As we have already looked after the simple explanation or the simple theme or the simple meaning of this term performance appraisal in the previous class, let me give you a small glimpse about this performance appraisal again. See, basically in simple terms, explaining again, performance appraisal is nothing but a performance review meeting where the employer and the employee sit together in a review meeting or in a review session where different aspects relating to the performance of the employee in a certain amount of period, in a certain period, is discussed. And based on the discussions or based on the communications happen between the employer and the employee relating to this performance, so many different outcomes arise. So or basically so many different HR decisions are taken. So this is basically something called as performance appraisal. Okay, so basically performance appraisal is the most important component of performance management, because that is the tool which is used to communicate the things related to performance. It may be the expectations, it may be the actual feedback, or it may be the different issues that the employees are facing or the employers are facing related to a particular employee. All these things are communicated using this particular tool called as performance appraisal. So performance appraisal plays a very important role in performance management. Always remember that. So basically, to give you a decent definition of performance appraisal, basically performance appraisal is a resultant of an annual or a semi-annual process where the employee's performance is evaluated against certain prefix standards, and the resultant information that is obtained from the comparison between the expected performance and the actual performance is used in order to give feedback to the employee. We are going to look at the detailed definition of this particular performance appraisal later, but I am just giving you a sample definition of this particular topic, performance appraisal. Okay, so what do I mean by an annual or a semi-annual process? See, generally what happens in organizations is organizations fix telling that okay, every 6 months we will be giving performance appraisal, or basically for every 6 months time frame, or for once every 6 months we will be conducting performance appraisals where each and every employee is appraised, or basically their performance is evaluated and further decisions are taken on. In some organizations this time frame will be 1 year. Okay, they will be telling that performance appraisal in our organization happens once every year. Similarly, there will also be other organizations where performance appraisal happens once every 3 months, once every 4 months. Now the time frame for this performance appraisal, is it 1 year or is it 6 months? 1 year means annually, 6 months means semi-annually. Okay, is it 1 year or is it 6 months or is it 4 months or is it 3 months? Depends on the organization. Now the organization fixes whether to implement this performance appraisal once every year, that is annually, or twice a year, that is semi-annually, or for every 4 months or 3 months. It depends on the organization. It is the organization's choice or organization's decision. Now there is this one particular concept called as a focal performance appraisal. Now what do you mean by a focal performance appraisal? See, let us assume an example telling that there is this particular organization and it has announced, or basically it has decided telling that in that particular organization performance appraisal will be given once every year. Now how will you interpret this particular statement, once every year? Is it stating that in the entire year there will be one fixed date when the organization will conduct performance appraisal? Is it indicating that, or is it indicating telling that when an employee joins 1 year from of his service, that means 1 year after the date of his joining, we will conduct performance appraisal. This that particular statement can also indicate this scenario, right? Yes, both are correct. In some organizations, what happens is, some organizations tell that, even though your the date of joining is different from different for different employees, I will be conducting performance appraisal on a fixed time. I do not consider your date of joining or whatever it is. In my organization, whenever you join, there is this particular date or particular day in an year, or a particular time in an year, where I will be conducting performance appraisal. This is one scenario, keep this in mind. Now there is this second scenario telling that in my organization, performance appraisal time frame, the time period is 1 year, and that 1 year starts from the date of your joining. There is this second scenario in which some organizations follow this. Now, so concluding or summarizing these two scenarios, I'm basically telling that when I tell that the performance appraisal is a resultant of an annual process or a biannual process, I'm telling that in general sense, and performance appraisal happens once every year or twice a year. Now it can also happen once every 3 months, once every 4 months. It depends on the organization. Leave that aside. So let us consider these situations in which it either happens annually or semi-annually. Now let's consider this situation. Let us take an example of an organization where performance appraisals are given once a year, that is annually. Now this particular once a year can be a fixed time or a fixed day or a fixed month in a year, where each and every employee is appraised on that particular day. Or it can be from the date of joining of every employee, 1 year from the date of their joining, that on that particular day, that means 1 year after the day of their joining, and basically every 1 year after the day of joining, performance appraisal happens. Now this particular first scenario is there, right? The scenario where the performance appraisal is given, or basically the performance appraisal which is given on a fixed date irrespective of the date of joining of the employees is there, right? That is generally called as a focal performance appraisal. That this is a main objective bit. Okay, now consider these two scenarios. Which scenario do you think saves more time? First scenario, right? That means, for example, yes, you can tell that sir, second scenario also saves time, right? See, basically, let me give you an example. Let us consider that in January, in particular January 2020, 31 days are right there, right? Now let us assume that in an imaginary scenario, okay, in an imaginary scenario, let us assume that 31 new employees joined in January 2020, where each of the employee joined on separated. That means on 1st January 2020, new employee joined, 2nd January new employee, 3rd January new employee. In this way, let us assume an imaginary situation where on each day in the year January 2020, the entire 31 days, 31 new employees joined. And in February, okay, in the next month 2020, again 28 new employees joined, each one on a single day. This doesn't happen, this doesn't happen at all. But let us take an imaginary situation. Okay, now if you want to use the second scenario in order to give performance appraisal after 1 year, that means after 1 year, entire January you will be involved in giving performance appraisals, entire February you will be involved in giving performance appraisal. In this way you are spending so much time on giving performance appraisals only. Whereas in first scenario, even though the this particular imaginary situation happens, the organization doesn't bother. It gives performance appraisal on one particular day, telling that whenever you join, it doesn't bother us. Performance appraisal will be given on a fixed day. This particular system, this particular performance appraisal which is given irrespective of the date of joinings, is generally referred as a focal performance appraisal. Very important objective bit, and one of the most common practices relating to performance appraisal that happens in organizations. Now, having told all this, let's get into the theory part of this performance appraisal. Okay, now let's go. So performance appraisal is an important part of performance management, as I already discussed. Now let us talk about the definition of performance appraisal. We have looked after simple explanation and the basic a definition which is in simplified form we have just discussed, right? Now let's look at the actual definition of performance appraisal. See, performance appraisal basically is a result of an annual or a biannual process in which a manager evaluates an employee's performance in relation to his job and uses that information, that means the information that is obtained by comparing the actual performance and the expected performance, to show the employee where and why improvements are necessary, if any. So this is the basic definition of performance appraisal. It is the resultant of an annual or a biannual process, okay, where the manager evaluates the performance of the employee against basically against certain predetermined or pre-communicated standards, and uses that information. That means after comparing both the actual performance and the expected performance, or actual performance or the pre-set standards, performance standards, after comparing you will be getting certain information, right? For example, if if the predetermined standards, performance standards, are basically the targets are 100 mobiles per month, and if the employee generated 120 mobiles per month, that means there is a positive gap, right? This is a good situation, right? In this in this scenario, communication will be, or basically the information given by the manager will be of one type. Now there will be a second situation where the target is 100 but the employee only produced 80 or 70, that means less than 100. In this scenario, the communication between the manager, that means who is giving the performance appraisal, and the employee will be in another type, right? There will be a third scenario in which the target is 100 and the employee produces exactly 100. That means he actually just matches and leaves the expected performance standards. In this scenario, the communication, the way of communication between the manager and the employee will be in a different way, right? So in this way, the manager evaluates the performance of the employee against certain predetermined standards, and then uses the information that he gets after evaluation in order to inform the employee different areas where improvements are necessary, if any improvements are necessary. So this is the basic concept of performance appraisal that you have to keep in your mind. Now moving on, a performance appraisal in which all the employees of the company are reviewed at once or at the same time of the year rather than the dates that they were hired is called a focal performance appraisal. This is what we were discussing. Okay. Now, next we are going to discuss a very small but a very important thing, telling performance appraisal is different from merit rating as it is wider than merit rating. Now, what do you mean by merit rating, and why did this particular concept of merit rating come into picture? See, now what do you mean by merit rating? Merit rating is simply giving rating based on the merit. For example, in our childhood, in our school days, whenever we come first in class or second in class, that means whenever the ranks are being announced in the class, what does the teacher or the lecturer or the faculty simply say? They will just call out names and tell that congratulations, you got first rank, congratulations, you got second rank, third rank, fourth rank, fifth rank. In this way, they will just communicate the rank that you have obtained, or they will just communicate the position that you are holding in the class, right? So there, feedback is not being given there. That means there they'll just tell that you got first rank, congratulations, but they will not tell that, see, you got first rank, congratulations, but there are certain mistakes that we have observed. There are certain mistakes that you have to work on, and these are your good things about you, your strengths, and these are your weaknesses, these are your areas of improvements, and these are the different areas where you are maintaining good things, you are not maintaining good things. In this way, nobody tells. In our school days, in our childhood, they'll just tell that you got first rank, you got second rank, you are the last, you hold the last position in the class, and all these things. Here basically only merit is only rating is given based on the merit, or just the merit position is being announced. This is basically merit rating. That means giving ratings basing on merit. That means if your performance is excellent, they'll tell that, okay, you're the best employee. If your performance is not good, they'll tell that you're the worst employee, but they will not tell you why you are best employee, in which area you are strong, and in which areas there is a scope of improvement. Similarly, the worst employee, generally there is no term called as a worst employee. Just to give you an example, now if, okay, in simple terms, let us assume that there is this employee whose performance level is very bad. Okay, now in that scenario, when we talk about merit rating, they'll just tell that, okay, your performance is worst, that's it, you can leave, or your performance is worse, try to improve in this way. But they will not actually specify, telling that what are his areas, specific areas of improvement, and all these things. Now that is basically merit rating. That means giving ratings just based on merit. Initially merit rating was there. Okay, so later, as the time passed on, this particular concept of performance appraisal came out, telling that, okay, just instead of just concentrating on the merit, we also have to concentrate on what the ups and downs. That is basic difference between the performance appraisal and the merit rating, where merit rating just concentrates on rating based on merit, whereas this particular concept of performance appraisal concentrates on so many different things whose scope is much wider than merit rating. Okay, so that is what we are discussing, telling that performance appraisal is different from merit rating as it is wider than merit rating.